I upload daily NBA content on this channel, so if that is something that interests you, then subscribe. Also drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. Also real quick, once again, if you have not checked it out yet, new episode of my NBA series, second round of the playoffs. Haven't seen it yet, go watch it. With that out of the way, this is the first unscripted video in a while because it was late last night and I didn't feel like writing a script. So today I wanted to talk about James Harden because some stuff came out about him. Apparently, he was at a strip club, or it might have been just a nightclub, but knowing James Harden, strip club is not exactly a big leap from there. And he was at this club while the Houston Rockets practice and all that stuff before the season starts was going on, the training camp, all of that. There were a lot of reports from the Rockets saying that James Harden would be present at training camp, and that was kind of the indication that they were going to sit on a James Harden trade. They weren't going to really try and force anything, and there was some stuff coming out from James Harden that suggested he wanted out, but there was no straight line drive, yes, James Harden definitely wants out. And the title of this video is probably something like, does James Harden want out or not? I'm going to go ahead and say probably yeah. And I'm also going to talk about what a James Harden trade would probably look like, as well as what the Rockets will look like this season after a trade like that, or what they'll look like with James Harden sticking around and not being happy. Him not showing up to training camp, to me, I think says that, like, the Rockets said I was going to be here to kind of imply that things were cool. And I think that's partly a strategy so that James Harden doesn't seem like he wants out so much to the point where his value gets reduced because teams know that the Rockets are desperate to move him. And I think James Harden was trying to make a statement there by saying, no, I definitely want out. I'm not at training camp because I definitely want out. To answer the question of the title, I really think, yeah, James Harden does really seem to be wanting out of Houston. And then the question becomes, what does a James Harden trade look like, and what do the Rockets look like after this? So what's interesting is I guess we can kind of talk about the Russell Westbrook trade first and kind of put everything into context there. John Wall, I do not believe he's going to be that great this year, and even if he is, I don't think he's going to play that great with James Harden unless the new coach and the new regime in general just kind of has a completely different offensive system to Daryl Morey and Mike D'Antoni, and I'm not expecting that to really be the case. I feel like it's going to be more of the same. And because of that, James Harden is probably going to want out for that reason because he's indicated that he doesn't want that. Also, I think it's been long enough in Houston at this point where he's like, I really can't just get that perfect team around me to where I can really win a championship. Now, if you're a Harden hater, you will make the argument that he kind of did already have that perfect team. And I would even say, not as a Harden hater, he did have the perfect team in like 2017 and 2018. The issue was just the Golden State Warriors. And yeah, they missed 27 straight threes in that game 7. But if Chris Paul was not injured, they probably make a finals, and they're definitely winning that finals. So I believe it was 2018 that I'm thinking of, yeah, with Chris Paul. They shouldn't have gone 0 for 27, but at the same time, if not for some poor injury luck and the fact that the Warriors are just a crazy good team, the Rockets very well could have won a championship, and James Harden would not be in this position now, and the Rockets would not be in this position now. And I would argue that outside of that, and just the unfortunate circumstance of the Warriors existing and the unfortunate circumstance of Chris Paul's health, outside of 2018 really, and 2019 kind of, but there was other factors there. Chris Paul got hurt once more. Outside of that, their best shot was 2018, and unfortunately they just had a Goliath in front of them, and that's kind of how that went. And outside of that year, they haven't actually put a real contender around James Harden. And even though I am critical of James, I am also of the opinion that he can be the best player on a championship team. He just needs the right team around him. He's not this upper echelon like top 3 player where you can put an team around him and he can carry them to a finals appearance. He needs a good team to do it, but if you are able to put a good team around him, then you obviously want James Harden. So the first trade that comes to mind, and it's kind of the one that I think is the most likely, that is James Harden to the Philadelphia 76ers for Ben Simmons. What would be awkward here would be trading for Ben Simmons, and then you have John Wall on the roster, and you can't just be like, hey, John Wall, don't play basketball for another 2 years until your contract's over. And even then, I think it's 3 years on top of that. They can't just do that. So they might have to release John Wall and draw out that contract, which is going to be a huge disaster if they do that. They might have to try and find a trade, which is kind of another huge disaster because that contract is pretty hard to trade unless you're trading another horrible contract, and it would be interesting. But Ben Simmons would be the best player that you could get back for James Harden, at least in terms of in the longer term. You might be able to get a slightly better player like him. You would probably be able to get Joel Embiid for James Harden, but I would rather have Ben Simmons because he's younger, less injury prone, cheaper, all of that, all the 9 yards. So for that reason, I would trade for Ben Simmons if I was the Houston Rockets. There's the Nets trade idea. It seems like KD and Kyrie don't want that. On top of that, the Nets don't really have the total amount of assets that you would want to trade for a guy of James Harden's caliber. So I don't think that one will be happening. I could see if the Hawks wanted to, they could probably make a James Harden trade happen. Like John Collins, Akeke Okongwu, I definitely said that wrong, DeAndre Hunter, a plethora of first-round picks, maybe even throw in Kevin Huerter, maybe even throw in Cameron Reddish. Like, they can throw their kitchen sink at the Rockets and still keep Trae Young and still keep Gallo and Bogdan, and the Rockets would get a good haul of young players and draft assets, and the Hawks would get James Harden. And him and Trae Young would be a ridiculous offensive backcourt. I don't know if the ceiling of that team is actually championship caliber, but it would be a good team for sure, and I could see the Hawks being interested in that. There's also the Warriors that have been proposed with trading Klay Thompson and then their Minnesota pick and other of their first-round picks in the future. I wouldn't do that. First of all, it'd be just a massive dick move to Klay Thompson. On top of that, I just don't know that I love the idea of James Harden in Golden State because I feel like unless he really bought into what Golden State does, it'd just be awkward. Maybe you could hold on to Klay Thompson in this process and move Draymond Green's big-ass contract, but I would just personally not want to do that if I'm the Warriors. I'd rather use those draft assets on someone who's going to be more okay playing within the Warriors system than James Harden likely is going to be. On top of that, for the Warriors, or for the Rockets rather, I do think they're going to be better trades out there. I'd rather have Ben Simmons than a Timberwolves picking like 3 Warriors first-round picks. So that's that. Outside of that, for the rest of the league, I mean, I've seen rumors of the Boston Celtics potentially, like a Jaylen Brown and draft picks for Harden trade. I would do that if I was the Celtics, but I would do it tentatively. I would only really do it if James Harden was like interested in being in Boston and playing with Jason Tatum, because I would not want to do that if he didn't want to be there, because if you can just keep the organic progress of the team that they have been, I'd rather do that than mess with it if that player is really not going to be happy there. But if he would be, then I would do that trade. If we're going with the original scenario of the Ben Simmons to Houston trade for James Harden in Philadelphia, he would be a great pairing with Joel Embiid, and I think that duo is far better than that of Embiid and Ben Simmons, because one, James Harden is better than Ben Simmons. Shut the hell up, Rudy. Apparently he disagrees. He's probably going to make me blue right now. James Harden also just pairs better with Joel Embiid. He is a playmaker like Ben Simmons, but he's also a very good scorer and three-point shooter, and they'd have that perimeter scoring presence as well as the playmaker that Embiid needs. I think just really Philadelphia would thrive under that hypothetical trade. And then for the Houston Rockets, as I said, Ben Simmons, the best youngish player that you can really trade for James Harden. And he's also a player that, at least theoretically, could be rebuilt around to where he can be the main guy if he has a bunch of shooting around him. May or may not be doing that on my NBA series. So if that is something that you are interested in, go watch it. But that would be the route for the Houston Rockets. We'll be like, okay, let's get this young guy who hasn't really had the proper chance yet in the NBA, and let's build around him. And let's let him be the new franchise cornerstone and replace James Harden. How high the actual ceiling of that is up for debate. I think it's relatively high, and I do think that would be the best clear move for the Rockets to pull off. So that is kind of what a Rockets trade would look like. As for what the Rockets will look like going into this season, if James Harden is still here, it's going to be awkward. Like, having a training camp for the Rockets without James Harden, like, you might as well not even have a training camp. That team revolves so much around the singular player that not having him, what's the point? Everyone's not going to be playing like this when the season comes around, because James Harden's going to be there and he's going to take 25 shots a game. For the players, the new players on the Rockets, if everything went right and James Harden had actually bought into being in Houston for another year and the offensive system was just flawless, I could actually see the Rockets being like the best they've ever been with James Harden, but like everything would have to go flawlessly. By that I mean 2017 John Wall, 2017 DeMarcus Cousins, Christian Wood has a breakout season, and all of their other role players are still as good as they were last season, if not better. And then James Harden is playing in an off-ball system, so John Wall is now one of the primary ball handlers, and James Harden plays off-ball a good bit, and Christian Wood and DeMarcus Cousins are spacing the floor. DeMarcus Cousins is a beast in the paint. John Wall is an incredibly good defensive player. PJ Tucker is still the incredibly good defensive player. He also didn't play. He seems to have some beef with the Rockets right now. I'm not really going to dive into that because as much as I like him, it's PJ Tucker. So I do think the team could actually be even potentially better than the 2018 Rockets if just everything went right. But even then, I don't know that I would confidently bet on them beating the Lakers or the Clippers even in the playoffs. And for that reason, I feel like the Rockets are just kind of delaying the inevitable. It's like when you don't check your bank account so you can pretend like you aren't really poor. Like you like I've done this in the past where I'll be like, I definitely don't have enough money to buy this thing, but I'm going to buy it and it's going to say negative 17 on my bank account. But if I don't look at it, then I'm not negative $17 rich. So I'm doing fine. I'm just going to not look at my bank account and everything will be okay. That's basically what the Rockets are doing right now. You know that GIF or GIF, whatever your sexual preference is, the one of fucking Marge from The Simpsons, like, oh shit, don't look at me. That's what the Rockets management is right now with James Harden. Like, you're delaying the inevitable at this point. This team is not a contender, even if James Harden buys all the way in. You're gonna lose ticket sales. That's just kind of the way it goes. But you kind of just have to trade him at this point, and you're delaying the inevitable. So just the best way is to actually look at your bank account, try to avoid paying an overdraft fee. I don't know where this fucking metaphor is going. Just trade the guy. That's it. Trade James Harden. So yeah, I'm not saying they should just rush out a trade, but it's pretty clear to me they're not going to have all the time in the world. And yeah, just trade the guy. But shout out to Rudy for editing this video. Again, go check out that My NBA video if you have not yet. But that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.